Good morning, everybody. So happy to have you here with us today. I'm Denny Zane. We are here. I'm on the Bermuda Triangle, so excuse me if I have a time delay. I hear that time stops here in the Bermuda Triangle. Great to have you here to discuss transportation technology and how these technologies can be important to our finding solutions for both air quality and climate change. We want to thank all of our generous sponsors who make an annual contribution to Move LA and help us to continue our work to improve transit and address affordable housing, address climate change and air quality in LA County. In particular, I want to recognize Southern California Gas Company, Southern California Edison, LA Department of Water and Power, LA Care Health Plan, and LA Metro, all of whom are sponsors and are represented today here on our panel. My first task here is to introduce a surprise guest, Assemblyperson Autumn Burke. Autumn Burke is really a rising star in the state legislature, and we've been tracking her career closely as a progressive advocate for cleaner transportation. In particular, we were impressed with a recent op-ed she and Assemblymember Bill Quirk wrote for the, I guess it was San Francisco Chronicle, where they championed the need for green hydrogen to meet our zero emission goals. We strongly believe in what that piece had to say, and we are very appreciative of her presence here with us today, and looking forward to working with the hydrogen industry in partnership toward our clean air and climate goals. So I think I should also, do we give Autumn a chance to speak here, Eli?
Anyway, good morning, everyone. And I want to thank you all and thank the Move LA team, Denny Zane and Ellie Littman for inviting me to today's event. I want to join you, obviously, in recognizing the longest serving chairman of the AQMD governing board. He spent his entire career fighting for environmental justice for all. And as he puts it, if you're not taking care and representing the people who can't take care of themselves, then you are not really living a life mission. And he is one of the most respected environmentalist leaders in California politics. He is my best friend and he is my dad. So I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to do this. During his tenure as the AQMD chairman, my dad made environmental justice a centerpiece through programs that empowered communities of color. Because of this example he's given me, I'm able to stand on his shoulders today and fight for everything that I believe in. So thank you, Daddy, for everything you've done for the state of California and for our family. I couldn't be more proud. Now, I want to commend you all at Move LA for hosting this important event and for engaging in these critical conversations about mobility in Los Angeles. I represent one of the fastest growing areas in Los Angeles. And as we all know, traffic in our region is a big problem that requires bold solutions. I know that one bold solution should be to embrace new technology that's being made available to us right now in order to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Because transportation makes up 41% of our state's local emissions, so we have to have a meaningful conversation about the future of transportation and technology. As all of you know, I support the governor's $1 billion budget proposal to increase the pace and scale of construction of electric vehicle charging and hydrogen fueling stations, but I think we can go further. Earlier this year, my colleague Bill Quirk and I wrote an op-ed about why California must invest in hydrogen infrastructure to meet their zero emission goals. In the op-ed, we challenged everyone to embrace the vision of deploying twin technologies to move us forward. In order for California to meet our ambitious GHG reduction goals, we must increase access and affordability so that everyone is able to afford cleaner cars and contribute to the goal, regardless of the zip code that they live in. If we commit to a vision of environmental equity for all, we can drive into the future together, and I know we can do that. California should be spending its public infrastructure dollars in a manner that is consistent not just with our climate goals, but with our state's values as well. I want to thank you again today for having me. Thank you to Move LA and to all the today's panelists for having these important conversations. And thank you for acknowledging my wonderful father. Like I said, I could not be more proud I'm a proud daughter. He has a proud granddaughter who luckily is in school, and he's a great pop to her, and a great dad, and a great environmentalist to the state of California. So thank you so much. Hi, Daddy. I love you.
Sweetheart. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, yes.
Thank you. Love you.
I love you.
So as we begin our discussion here today, I want to take a moment and thank Bill Burke for his several decades, almost 3 decades of service at the Air Board. I think it must be acknowledged that he has actually done rather a bit more than one understands by his almost 3 decades of services at the Air Board, at the Air District, where he was for 23 years chair. But I remember back in the early 90s when I had been a council member in Santa Monica and left to become the director of the Coalition for Clean Air and started inhabiting the South Coast Air District from time to time, and traveling to Sacramento to go to the Air Resources Board meetings and maintaining some interest in coastal issues as well. And at about that time, Bill joined the South Coast Air District Board. And at that time, the Air District was really the acknowledged leader in the country, in fact, in the world, on many issues of air quality. Its early air plans at that moment in time were really attracting lots of attention, really providing leadership around the country. As was the California Air Resources Board. This was a time when the zero emission mandate, the electric vehicle, was really getting started. And so I was moving around the state. It seemed as if everywhere I'd go, I'd find Bill Burke. I mean, he was at the South Coast Air District. It wasn't long before he was on the California Air Resources Board. He was at the California Coastal Commission as well. I kept thinking, is there one Bill Burke? How could one person be covering so much territory, both policy-wise and geographically? I was very, very impressed with all the work that he was doing. And I have been all the more impressed watching him lead the South Coast Air District in its efforts to clean the air in the nation's most polluted air area. And in fact, everyone will have to acknowledge we've had extraordinary success. And it is our success, frankly, at the South Coast and at the Air Resources Board that actually gives us even a ghost of a chance of meeting the challenge of climate change. Now, in the middle of that discussion looms large diesel technologies. And this has been one of the things that Dr. Burke has focused a lot of attention on, as has the South Coast and the California Air Resources Board. Because diesel technologies provide the overwhelming share of the NOx that is the primary pollutant for our air. It is also a major source of carbon, also a major source of black carbon and ozone, which are 2 short-lived climate pollutants we have to solve. So Bill, you've been leading the fight, not only for a long time, on the key issues that really matter, that are pivotal to our ultimate success in both clean air and climate change. So I really want to thank you for all of these years of leadership, and I'm so proud to have a chance to introduce you here today. Oh, by the way, Bill,
Denny,
Painesville, Ohio, really?
Thank you for the kind words. It was kind of a mutual thing because everywhere I went, there was Denny Zane. I thought you were either the FBI or the CIA and you were following me, but I'm glad to find out we were working on the same cause. I spoke to Denny Tabor this morning before I came, and I told him that this is probably my last speech to the public in my career, probably. And so I have this very well-prepared speech that was prepared for me by the district. But I think that I would rather talk about some musings that I have, that I think I'm not going to try and preach to the transportation experts about transportation. I'd like to talk about things that I've experienced and things that are in the future that I think are there, and that you ought to at least put in your mind whether you agree with me or don't agree is immaterial. At least we can all think about it. So, I'd like to start by saying that Dr. King, for years and years, used to say 10 a.m. on Sunday morning is the most segregated time in the United States of America. Well, I have one better than this. If you go 1 mile in from the ocean and the 1,000-mile coastline of California, you have 1,000 square miles. Those 1,000 square miles are the most segregated property probably in the world. Now, I served, as Denny mentioned, on the Coastal Commission for 13 years. And in those 13 years, there was not one single permit issued to a person of color. So, it's obvious who's living on the California coast. The executive director said, the California coast is never saved. We're always in the process of saving it. And my question always was to him, who are we saving it for? Because we're not living there and we're not recreating there. But now there's a problem that's coming called sea rise. And it's going to be significant. And it's going to put a lot of people out of their homes who are currently living along the ocean's edge in California. And it's going to push those people inland. Now, in all this property that we are currently calling environmental justice areas, my perception is that they will not stay that designation. Because while some people continue to view the freeway system as the panacea of transportation of automobiles and truck traffic, I think that there are people in this forum this morning who will live to see the destruction of all freeways. I think that the tunneling system that is being demonstrated currently every day in Las Vegas, Nevada is the future. When you could move people underground at a higher rate of speed, and quite frankly, you wouldn't have to worry about whether their vehicles polluted or not, because you could put in a pollution control system in the tunnels that would make it zero emission. But people say, man, that's in the future. That's beyond my lifetime. I'm worried about today's problems. Well, when you look at a guy like me, 12 years before I was born, Orville and Wilbur Wright took their first flight. And 3 days ago, we flew a helicopter on Mars, which is 126 million miles away. That's in one lifetime. But, people say, well, I can't, you're an old guy, you lived forever. Why didn't you die 50 years ago? And that's too long for us to wait. Well, how about next week? The Air District has invested in and helped develop a machine that's going to be operational, we hope either next week or the week after, which was worked on, well, you know how people fight change. When this concept came to the board, it was met with enormous resistance. And our new chairman, Ben Benoit's father, and I went to bat for this because we went down and we saw the demonstration plant and we talked to scientists both at the district and various commercial organizations, including one of the sponsors of today's conference. And they said the science behind this is feasible. This is workable. So even though at the district, top scientists were constantly ragging on this project, we kept pushing it. And when Ben's father passed away, I took it on myself that no matter what they did, I was going to do everything within my powers to help make sure that if this project was in fact viable, that we would not stop it. Well, now people are beginning to jump on the train because they see it's going to work. And let me tell you what this machine does. The various applications are so enormous that we not even sure where the end line is. But one of the things is that it takes organic material and turns it into energy, turns it into natural gas, turns it into clean diesel, turns it into hydrogen. And it allows a process in the oil industry where you can stop fracking, no more fracking necessary, and you still get the same amount of oil out of the wells. Now, the oil industry's happy, the environmentalists are happy. Those people whose water tables were polluted are going to be happy. All this was done in a matter of 10 years, but it's happening next week. So, you know, the kind of futuristic application of technology to our problems is going to be monumental. And from my observation, the speed of technology development is made more rapid by the development of the previous technology. So technology is now moving faster than it's ever moved in the history of the world. So the sky's the limit, or the earth's the limit if you're looking for tunnels. So I'm very hopeful about the future. I'm very optimistic about the world in which my granddaughter, Autumn's daughter, is going to live in. And I think that your world, the world that you're living in, is going to be better. So these 28 years that I've spent at AQMD has been a pleasure for me. And I hope in some small way, I have helped push the ball down the field. So thank you for having me this morning. And I very much appreciate, Denny, you having Autumn come and introduce me. That was truly a surprise. I had talked to her not 10 minutes before I sat down.
It was hard for us to hide on Zoom, but I think we pulled it off. So.
Oh, you did. You got me good.
Thank you, Bill. Bill,
thank you so much.
You, but I was going to say I was trying to figure out a way to also get your wife Yvonne, my former boss and supervisor, involved, but I couldn't figure out how to keep that a secret.
I'm surprised you can't hear her. She's on the phone in the back of our house, and you know she talks very loud. So,
Yeah, it's hard when we're all holed up together. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Burke. I mean, you're absolutely right. The futuristic application of technology is going to be the way we solve our problems now and right away. And you know, it's really interesting. I got an email yesterday from our new Senator Padilla's office. We had been advising him on some new legislation that they just introduced called the Reconnecting Communities Act, where they're actually talking about funding the removal or the retrofitting of barriers, such as an airport or a freeway even, that has disconnected or taken, you know, divided communities, and actually putting $2 billion a year or $3 billion a year to projects like that across the nation, you know, to figure out ways to bring communities back together. So, you know, I think we're seeing a real shift, and I think it you know, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, as Dr. King said, and I think.
no
I
question.
think I
Really interesting.
those words resonate.
Alex Padilla. Somebody asked me the other day if I knew Alex Padilla, and I started laughing. They said, "Well, why are you laughing?" I said, "The first time I met Alex Padilla, he was 18 years old and an intern in City Hall, and he needed a ride home. And I gave him a ride home to his mother's house out in the valley when he was 18 years old. So he's come a long way since that day."
For sure. Well, and that's a perfect segue, because we're actually going to kick it over to one of our probably many Valley folk. And just before I introduce Veronica Padilla Campos, and thank you, Dr. Burke, I just want to once again thank our event sponsors today. We have so many corporate, government, and labor partners who support us throughout the year. And thank you, Denny. We shared a little video recognizing him at the beginning of the program. There was one that we just got in recently, and that he didn't mention, so I wanted to also recognize Tranzito, who we'll hear from the CEO later, who's also one of our sponsors and event sponsor today. So thank you all. So next up, I want to introduce Veronica Padilla Campos. She's served as Pacoima Beautiful's executive director since 2013 and was recently appointed by Assembly Speaker Anthony Redmond to replace the retiring chair, Dr. Burke, on the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And it's an environmental justice nonprofit dedicated to promoting a healthy and sustainable environment in the San Fernando Valley. Veronica, are you there? There you are. Hello.
I am here, and thank you for the introduction. No relation to Alex. I get that a lot. I've been getting that since 2010 when I started working in the Valley. But great person, great family, and it is a pleasure to know him and have him representing us now in such an important position. But thank you to Move LA for hosting this important conversation today. And thank you to Dr. Bill Burke, whose leadership on the AQMD board for over the past 23 years as chair has been truly extraordinary. I will certainly have big shoes to fill as a speaker's new appointee on the AQMD board in June. So today's conversation on how we can use data and technology in transportation to improve our air quality and achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions is really about helping the people that I serve as executive director of Pacoima Beautiful. We are the only environmental justice organization serving the Northeast San Fernando Valley. Pacoima Beautiful was founded in 1996 by 5 relentless mothers who became distraught by the unpleasant sight of trash, lack of tree canopy, and toxic smells in the neighborhood. One of those founding mothers happens to be Marlene Grossman, who also became the founding president of Move LA when it was established by Denny Zane in 2007. What you will hear today is how we can all benefit from technologies ranging from demonstration projects at the South Coast Air Quality District to air quality sensors being deployed on buses in cities like Calcutta and Mumbai in India. What these projects have in common is they can also help families and communities just like Pacoima. places that have been forgotten for far too long and suffered the consequences of environmental injustice and racism. Pacoima Beautiful is demonstrating that it can be done in our communities too. In 2020, we launched an EV car share program called Pacoima Electro Share in partnership with LACY, the LA Clean Tech Incubator, and Envoy to test membership levels, payment models, and barriers to entry for EV adoption. We're also working with LADOT on bringing zero emission buses through our Green Together Collaborative, funded by the Governor's Strategic Council. There are so many opportunities for community-based organizations like ours to work with government agencies and even private industries to bring economic opportunities to our communities that help clean our air and improve our health. That is what today's conversation is about, and I really thank you all for being here and joining us in the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And you know, we're excited for your leadership. I know you probably have a long, a lot to learn, but thank you so much. And you're welcome to stick around if you wanted to join in the discussion. I know you got a hard out at noon. So I'm now honored to introduce Danny Tabor. He's Move LA's president, served on the board for nearly a decade. And Danny was raised in Inglewood, served as the Southern California liaison for the Commerce Secretary, and was elected and served as mayor of Inglewood in 2010. He's passionate about public transit, affordable housing, and how the private industry can help improve both, and also help improve communities and address issues of equity. So Danny, take it away. The panel is yours. Let's do this.
Hey, thank you, Eli, and Veronica, thank you. And I feel like we're kindred spirits, you over the hill in the valley and me in the South Bay. So we look forward to working with you and Pacoima Beautiful to expand it. And obviously, when you mentioned Marlene Grossman, my predecessor here as president of Move LA, but more importantly, the guiding spirit to both Denny Zane and to all of us at Move LA to keep us focused on what the population of seniors and folks who have typically been without a voice, what the needs are. And so we thank both of you for giving us that lead. I'm excited today to be able to moderate this panel. I want to kick it off by saying you will not receive, the audience I'm talking to now, you will not receive the traditional standing at the podium, deck-powered presentations from our panelists. You're going to have an opportunity to participate in a very direct and frank conversation that these individuals are working on technology, the problems of air quality, the problems of transit coordination and facilitation, and as Veronica just mentioned, the real need to collaborate between people power and government power. And so to begin, I'm going to introduce Dr. Matt Miyasato, Deputy Executive Officer of Science and Technology Advancement at the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And to Matt, if I can be so informal, I'd like you to describe the role of AQMD to acknowledge that, as I do, having grown up here in the region, that the air quality has really cleaned up since the 60s and 70s, and to what do you attribute those efforts? But the real question being, what still do we need to do? And then I'll follow on with a question. And Matt, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And let me just acknowledge that much of the air quality improvement that we've seen over the past, 50 years or so are really due to the visionaries that have been on our board, like Dr. Bill Burke. You know, we've got the incoming vice chair, Senator Delgado's here, and then an incoming board member that was just appointed that you just heard from. So it's having the right people on the board to direct the agency toward those goals. But let me get to the specifics. As Daniel mentioned, I'm Matt Miyasato, the Deputy Executive Officer for Science and Technology Advancement. That's a long way of saying I'm kind of I like to think of myself as a chief technology guy at the nation's largest air district. And we have made great strides. I grew up in Southern California in the 70s. I remember, the smog alerts. So if we put it in terms of data, we've actually reduced the unhealthy airs. Back in the 70s, it was over 200 days a year that we didn't meet the federal standards for clean air. So that is over 2/3 of the time in our region, we had unhealthy air quality. That has now been cut down to more than half. So 67% reduction in those days. So less than 100 days that we don't meet healthy air. But the problem is that as science evolves, we're finding that smog, ozone pollution, is actually worse to your health than we originally, or all the scientists originally anticipated. And so the EPA rightfully keeps lowering the standard, saying you need to meet even lower standards to achieve healthy air. And so we're constantly chasing that goalpost. But that's a good thing, because we're trying to make sure that the air quality in the South Coast region is healthy for all of our residents. So Daniel, you said, what do we attribute it to, aside from the visionary leadership at our board? It's really to the regulations that have been implemented by our agency for stationary sources, but also by the state. The state board, the California Air Resources Board, is responsible for providing lower standards for mobile sources. Now, I want to make sure that we understand that over 80% of all the pollution in our region that causes our smog problem are due to mobile sources. If they're not the stationary sources, over 80% is due to mobile sources. So I'm talking about passenger vehicles, but mostly due to the goods movement system and heavy duty trucks, off-road vehicles, locomotives, marine vessels. All of those larger, typically diesel technologies are those that are contributing to our NOx problem that provides, that then turns into smog, which is the ozone issue that we're talking about. So if we look at where do we need to go, even though we've gotten appreciably better, we have to reduce emissions by 45% by 2023. That's 2 years away, and another 55% by 2031. So if you think about that, we've got to cut NOx emissions from all of these typical transportation sources over half in the next, 2 to 7 years. So that's a huge lift for our agency, and it's due to mobile sources. So it's really not within our regulatory authority. So what have we been doing at the nation's largest air district? As Dr. Burke mentioned, as Ms. Padilla mentioned, is we've been pushing technologies, right? And technology is one of the tools in our toolbox that can help us achieve clean air. And so we've long supported, fuel cell bus development, electric technologies, hydrogen infrastructure, electric infrastructure. And those are the things that are now coming. We were one of the first agencies to support fuel cell bus deployments back in the early 80s. And now you can see that fuel cells are becoming commercially available. And we've looked at multiple technologies, not just fuel cells and batteries, but a near-term solution that we believe is completely viable and should be deployed in great numbers are near zero natural gas engines. 90% cleaner technologies that can get us emission reductions, 90% lower NOx, no diesel PM. And so we're looking at multiple pathways that can achieve our clean air goals. And so we've got to look at all the tools in the toolbox, as I mentioned. And on top of that, infrastructure is going to be huge. We need to ensure that there is sufficient grid availability, power reliability for electric technologies, hydrogen fueling infrastructure. So it's great to hear the Assembly member talking about hydrogen needs for the state and for the region. But one great thing about renewable natural gas that's being provided by the market currently. You've got folks like Clean Energy and others that are providing renewable natural gas. They see a business opportunity. And so we've got to engage the market in that way to ensure that it's not just the state, it's not just the region that's providing government incentives toward, meeting these cleaner goals. And the final thing I just want to mention, Daniel, is that we want to make sure that there's a distinction, because oftentimes they conflate the two issues about local air quality, regional air quality, and greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, right? So our district, South Coast, is concerned about the health impacts due to criteria pollutants, that is smog, particulate matter, air toxics. We believe that you can get clean air and climate change, meet those climate change goals with the same technologies, but they're separate issues. And our main mission is really to clean up the air and have public healthy air for everyone that resides in our region. And on top of that, if we do it right, we believe we can get climate change or meet the climate change goals as well. So thanks for having us on the panel. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Matt. And I should have also thanked Dr. Burke for his leadership. I I shared earlier that there's a familiar relationship. Dr. Burke's wife, Yvonne, and my mother went to high school together and were classmates, served on the city council at Manual Arts High School. My first position in political office was as an intern, well, actually as a congressional intern in her Washington, D.C. office, and then had the privilege of being represented by her when she was elected to the assembly as I lived in Inglewood. So I'm excited. And I want to thank you for your comment that you put in there that there is an economic opportunity associated with the introduction of new technologies and in partnerships that get created. And I think you'll hear from the majority of panels today how they're attempting to exploit the market opportunities for the benefit of communities of color, but underrepresented communities throughout the region. And that's exciting. And I guess I would leave it with this, that many will have ideas that are potential demonstration projects in partnership with the AQMD. And so perhaps we'll come back and I'll ask you how we might facilitate those ventures as well. Next up on our panel is Tanya. Tanya is with the SoCalGas company, is going to talk to us about their sustainability plan, but Tanya Peacock is manager of the public policy and planning for SoCalGas. And I would just ask Tanya if you would start by sharing with us what role you see the gas company playing in advancing technologies. I know that there has been sort of a transition over time from diesel to clean diesel to recyclable natural gas, as we just heard from Matt. But there's even more work that the gas company is doing. And so Tanya, please share with us where we are in time with SoCalGas.
Absolutely, and thank you, Danny. And very, very pleased to be part of this panel. And first I want to share that SoCalGas recently came out with a very significant climate commitment. We call it Aspire 2045. And what that commitment is to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions in our operations, but most importantly, in the delivery of energy by 2045. So this commitment makes SoCalGas actually the largest gas distribution utility in North America to set a net zero target that includes scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So it's really the scope 3 emissions, which are significant. And so that would eliminate not only its direct emissions, that's the scope 1, but also those generated by customers' energy delivered through SoCalGas's pipelines, and those are the scope 3 emissions. So if you just putting that another way, it means that not only will the cars we use, the buildings we own, the facilities we operate are all going to make this transition. It means that all of the fuel, so currently traditional natural gas, is going to have to be net zero by 2045. So this aligns with the Paris Climate Agreement's recommendations and reflects the company's focus on supporting California with a resilient gas grid through the energy transition as we build a carbon neutral economy. So you may ask, how is SoCalGas going to achieve this net zero goal? How do we know it's real? And where's the accountability? So the commitment is important because it's a milestone, it puts a stake in the ground, and it's just the beginning, and there's a lot more to come. So we are working on very specific, measurable framework for ESG related goals over the next coming months. And later this year, you're going to see a comprehensive sustainability strategy and a clean fuel strategy. So that's where all the details and the accountability are going to come in. And so again, it's an important milestone for the company to make this sort of a commitment. And I'm going to say, we're going to need all of you to hold us accountable and make sure that it's real and measurable and achieves real emissions reductions. So that's the high level on the Aspire 2045 commitments. And I hope to be, back on another one of these panels talking about all of the details once those are released. For today, also, I have in terms of, what is the gas company doing and advancing technologies that can help us end our reliance on diesel for transportation and address the NOx and SOx and particulate matter issues we have in so many of our communities. So I have a great example that was just announced today, and it's a partnership between Sunline Transit. They're the transit agency that serves Riverside County, parts of Riverside County, and they currently have 17 hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. So what this project is going to do, it will produce hydrogen from renewable natural gas at Sunline Transit Agency's hydrogen fueling station in Thousand Palms, California. So it's a research project, it's a demonstration project. It's called Hydrogen Silver Stars, and it's going to produce renewable hydrogen to fuel Sunline's fleet of 17 hydrogen fuel cell electric buses and support further expansion of that fleet. And the goal is very much to produce emissions-free renewable hydrogen for fuel cell electric vehicles, buses, and the idea is that this technology can be commercialized and utilized at other locations, and also fuel cars and trucks. And the key thing is here at a price competitive with gasoline, because that's really been the challenge for hydrogen, but in particular, renewable hydrogen. So just a little bit about what the technology is. The project will make hydrogen from renewable natural gas the same way that it's done currently today in large centralized hydrogen production plants. It's a process called steam methane reformation, but it's going to do this with very compact equipment, small enough to fit in a tractor trailer container. So it's modular. The project, and here's a very exciting part about the project, the STARS component of it is an electricity powered induction heating process. Means that there's absolutely no combustion to create that steam to then create the hydrogen. So this significantly reduces greenhouse gas emissions compared to traditional hydrogen production. And even more cool is that the system is produced using 3D printing. So this makes it well suited for mass production after it's tested at the Sunline facility, and it should make it drastically less expensive to make and operate compared to alternatives. So instead of having to truck hydrogen around to stations, you can produce it on site in a very affordable, low emissions, low greenhouse gas emissions, criteria pollutant emissions way. So this is just, SoCalGas has played a key role in advancing all kinds of technology innovations over the years. And so this is just another example of how we've partnered with other entities, with transit agencies, to really bring innovations and new technologies to the market. So I'm really excited about this project with Sunline. I'm optimistic that low-cost on-site renewable hydrogen production really could be a game changer for fuel cell electric buses. And this would absolutely improve air quality all around Southern California and beyond. So I'll pause there with that exciting example and very much look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for sharing. And that is an exciting conversation. I'm looking at car buying for my youngest daughter, and one of the vehicles that we looked at was a hydrogen fueled vehicle. And I'm trying to convince her that not only is it safe, but it'll be in the long run very cost effective for her. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the hydrogen 2040, I should say 2045 sustainability plan in the questions. Now to introduce our panelist who is farthest away. And I don't mean interplanetary, but around the planet, 12 and a half hours ahead of us or behind us, I'm never sure. Rocky Basu. Rocky is formerly with the World Bank, now a consultant to the World Bank and the Asia Bank, has been working in India on the adaptation of technology to meet transit needs of pedestrians during the transit riders during the pandemic. with a variety of partners and players. And Rocky, I'm excited that you're here. I want to get you started right now. So when I think of India, I have millions and billions of people compared in their urban cores compared to what we see in Los Angeles. So is it fair to say that the adaptation and utilization of technology there is replicable, is easily replicable in smaller environments like we have in California, particularly in Southern California? And to what extent are your demonstration projects there involving multiple modes of transit and having what kind of impact in air quality in your urban centers and throughout the various regions where you're engaged?
Hi, Danny. A very good morning to you and all the panelists. I am 12 and a half hours ahead of you, so it's almost midnight, but I wouldn't miss this conversation for the world. You are very right. Let me put some context in what is density. We are talking about dense, and I mean very dense. I think on a single American city ranks among the top 50 most densely populated urban areas in the world. So LA, I believe, has about 7,300 people per square mile. New York, I think the urbanized area of New York is about 5,500 square mile. Kolkata, where I am presently, has 25,000 people per square mile. Mumbai, we are talking about 20,000 people per square mile. So very dense, congested, highly urbanized, rapidly growing, and extremely polluted. So to give you again a context on what I'm talking about with regard to the pollution, the worst air quality day in California, which was the recent fire, pales in comparison to a bad air quality day in New Delhi, which is the capital of India, where the fine particulate levels in New Delhi often reaches about 900 micrograms per cubic meter, which blows past EPA's definition of hazardous air, which I think is about 500. So what do we do when we are talking about this kind of rapid urbanization, which India and China is going through? There hasn't been much historical evidence of this kind of fast-paced growth. So while the government is looking at, let me make a point here, which was said by Matt. The challenges are very similar in terms of about 90% of India's pollution is from mobile source. The transport sector is one of the largest polluters, which is a combination of rapidly growing vehicles, old vehicle stock, poor quality fuel, etc. I mean, interestingly enough, though, India still is extremely transit dependent. About 70% of the people still uses transit, but you're talking about high level of congestion, which is leading to a lot of pollution along with low quality fuel, etc. So what is the government doing? Well, the Indian government is doing a lot. Electric vehicle has been introduced, and the government is trying to move to a clean fleet by about 2030. They have leapfrogged into Euro 6 standards, monitoring of air pollution across India, both urban and rural, has been set up, but a lot remains to be done. And, you know, as a policymaker yourself, you know that implementation of these policies, especially in a federal system like India's, administrative system is very similar to the US. There's a local, regional, national level, and they often don't see eye to eye. Takes a long time. So my work, therefore, has been largely to sort of focus on the what's the opportunity in the market to use disruptive technology to quickly address the challenges of air pollution. And I always say that the first, we have to start at the very basic. How do we get more people back in transit? And at a minimum, if we do that, while all of this new technology in terms of electric vehicle, hydrogen fuel cell, all are happening, are coming, if this is something that we could all collectively work towards, that itself will address a large part of the challenges. So in India, we have launched a couple of very interesting products which are working very well. So one is mobility as a service, or MaaS, which provides an alternative to private cars and enables a seamless door-to-door journey experience by integrating different modes. So it's a multimodal platform that provides route information, modal information. You can make your payment to buy your tickets. Most importantly, it has a unique COVID feature, as in it tells you how crowded your bus or train or tram is. And it allows you to book a seat early enough based on the crowdedness in the transit system. It also has a safety feature which enables passengers to trigger an alarm if there is an incident. And what we have just started is displaying low polluting routes in Kolkata, which we are developing from input data from real-time hyperlocal air pollution that we are monitoring. So by taking into account the existing sensor infrastructure that has been put up in the city, it makes possible to know anywhere, anytime, what is the pollution. And we sort of use that data to identify clean routes. So the objective of this is to foster citizen awareness. For freight, we are doing something very interesting. We have a digital queue management system, which we are implementing for the port of Kolkata, which is a solution for trucks. And it will reduce truck congestion, which often leads to loss of productivity and rise in pollution. So a truck booking and a tracking system can help truck drivers save countless hours waiting, improving productivity rates of staff, and reduce pollution. And again, that pilot is ongoing, and we hope to bring that to the Port of LA and Long Beach. In fact, what may be of interest is that the queue management solution for freight was first introduced by us as a smart pandemic management tool for metro. So when India was recovering from the pandemic, well, now it's gone back right in the middle of that. There was no transit service for almost a year. And that took a huge toll on the economy, particularly to much of the lower income population, which are extremely transit dependent. So we developed this queue management system with the help of a designed robot, or what we call a bot, which kept passenger count on the metro well below 400 to maintain social distancing norms. Sorry, I thought for a minute that I was disconnected. So what we did, it's a very simple solution. So we generated a color-coded sort of a boarding pass, which was sent to people using their mobile phone. And it changes color every hour. So people would make their booking ahead, 24 hours ahead on the train. And using the color code, they would enter the metro station. And all they had to do was, they would just hold up their phone and it showed that particular, whatever the color was in that given time, which avoided queuing at the gate. And it allowed Metro to continue its service, maintaining social distance. So that became the real sort of smart pandemic tool, which allowed Metro to start its operation. As you see, I could get into details of this technology later on, but these are very simple solutions that we used. And I think there is a great opportunity for us to bring this to LA, particularly as LA is recovering from the pandemic, and it is giving a unique opportunity to grow back into a greener, cleaner, safer, and more efficient city. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Andy, you have to unmute.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm unmuting myself. I was saying thank you, Rocky. And as we get into questions, we want to see how that might be applied here in Los Angeles. Next up, we've got Francisco Oaxaca, who is the Chief Communications and Community Relations Person for LA Care. LA Care is if not the largest, one of the largest community health care providers within the state of California, certainly within the Los Angeles region. And I'm excited, Francisco, because and this is a shameless promotion here, my wife is involved in on-demand transit, and I hear LA Care has been using transit as a means to ensure that your customers, the patients that you serve through your system are able to maintain contact with their healthcare providers and to meet and reach their destinations in time for everything from traditional follow-ups to new practices. So I'm excited to hear about it. And Francisco, why don't you share what LA Care is doing to use transit to provide healthcare services?
Thanks, Danny, and I appreciate the introduction. I'm sure that, and I'm not taking it personally, but I'm sure people, started wondering what is a health plan doing amongst the list of sponsors for today's events, and then what does this health plan guy do in part of this panel with all of these really wonderful transportation experts. I can claim some embedding of transportation DNA. I was with Metrolink for 17 years before I moved out of the transit world for a bit, and I'm in healthcare now. But as I think all of you in the audience and on the panel can attest, transit follows you around, and it becomes part of your DNA, like I said. And you are correct, Danny. LA Care is one of the largest health plans in LA. We actually are the largest publicly operated health plan in the country. We serve about 2.4 million individuals in LA County. So just looking around, roughly 1 out of every 4 or 5 Angelinos is an LA Care member. And the great majority of those individuals, we provide them with Medi-Cal health insurance coverage, which is really provided to those individuals who have traditionally had the most difficult time getting and retaining health insurance coverage. Those with lower incomes, the elderly, as well as individuals who fall into those categories of the most vulnerable in the population in the county. And one of the unique benefits that our Medi-Cal members have access to is free transportation to trips that are considered to be of relevance to them for their health care. So the term we use is medically eligible trips. So as you said, Danny, it's anything from visiting their primary care physician, a specialist appointment, to have medical tests, x-rays, to go to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription. There's a whole long list of trips that are eligible. So when I joined LA Care about 6 years ago, I found out that the health plan had been in the transportation business for a number of years. And, I think as we all know, sometimes it works out best to do the things you're good at and let others do those things that you're maybe not so good at. But unfortunately, the state has determined that it's the health plans that are responsible for making sure that their members receive this transportation. And over the past probably 2 or 3 years, I was part of an effort at LA Care to really kind of deconstruct what we were doing when it came to offering transportation to our members and really figure out how we could provide a much better transit experience. This is a transit operation that probably most of you aren't aware of. Pre-pandemic, we were providing over 100,000 trips per month to our members. And that's more than some of the local municipal operators are running in their operations here in the county. And we were investing a little over $50 million a year in providing this transit operation, all through contracted transportation providers all throughout the county. So it's a significant investment. It's a significant commitment, and it's something that we really wanted to make sure worked the right way for our members. So we've gotten to the point where where we felt that we had done everything we could in terms of getting the right people involved internally, building the right team, issuing a contract to a new provider that coordinates all this transportation for us to provide the right level of customer service. But I felt there was still a gap that needed to be filled. And for me, that gap was what I want to touch on a little bit today is how do we better integrate this, fairly significant transportation operation into the work that the rest of you are doing here in Los Angeles County. We've been doing this pretty much on our own, but our members are those individuals also that in most cases are the same individuals that all of you are trying to serve through all the work that you're doing in terms of increasing mobility and providing access, especially those populations who have had the most challenges in gaining access because transportation is a barrier. And I think there's three areas that I just wanted to touch on real quick that I see as hopefully the future for LA Care and how we can continue to build a better level of integration between what we're tasked with doing and what the rest of the county is doing when it comes to transportation. I think one area is how can we better integrate the needs of our members to be able to also access the other transportation options in the county that are offering much cleaner modes of transportation, clean air, low emissions, no emissions. We've talked a little bit about the different technologies that are being looked at when it comes to reducing emissions and reducing the dependence on fossil fuels. And that is one thing I would hope for LA Care to be able to work more closely with other partners in the county on is helping our members be able to access those other modes and have them be part of the trip planning that takes place to get them from home to a medical office or another key destination, and then back to be able to complete their trip and stay healthy, which is our bottom line. Another area is to start taking advantage of some of the more innovative transit solutions that are now actually coming into reality. And I'm thinking back to Dr. Burke's comments about, we're never going to live long enough to see some of these things. Well, we actually are. And I think it's really exciting. The Metro Microtransit Project, I think, is a great example. It's one I've had my eye on for several years, as I'm sure many of you have. But it is reality now. And I'm hoping that as we put more and more of this pandemic in our rearview mirror in this country and in this county, there will be a way for us to better integrate our members' needs with the availability of the microtransit project in the zones that it's operating. What most people don't know is that the health plans, and there are 5 health plans that offer Medi-Cal coverage in Los Angeles County, and all of them are tasked with offering the same transit benefit. And across those 5 health plans, it's well over 3 million individuals in the county who have Medi-Cal coverage that have access to a free transportation benefit. And the state has given the health plans the ability to include public transit as an option they offer to their members, to be able to get to and from their medically related appointments. So I think there's a great opportunity there to better integrate. As operational planning takes place across the county, I think the health plans can really help the transit agencies really focus in on what some of those key destinations are for Medi-Cal members in the county, community clinics, medical offices, medical group practices, hospitals, and what the level of need is for those medically related trips. I've been in conversations with the team at Metro that's working on updating the coordinated transportation plan, and in their research, one of the top trips that is shown to be the most challenging for county residents to complete in the surveys they've done was medically related trips, getting to and from doctors' offices and pharmacies to pick up prescriptions. And so I think that's another great opportunity that LA Care, I think, looks forward to working on. And then finally, we're in the middle of a large expansion of what we call our community resource centers. which is a chain of what will ultimately be 14 locations across the county that we're opening and operating with Blue Shield Health Plan to bring services and resources out to the communities that need them, rather than having folks have to travel longer distances. So we'd like to look at ways that we can put our resource centers on the map, on the transit route maps, so that we can reduce trip lengths and reduce the need for transfers and start taking advantage of more locally based transit services to serve our members and to serve the community. So other than that, we've got nothing else we're interested in, Danny. We just want to keep doing our thing with our members. But I'm looking forward to more conversation, and I'm glad to be part of the panel and glad to be involved with Move LA.
Well, thank you very much, and we're glad to have you on our board. And I think when you consider that you're moving 100,000 people around the region, that you are indeed a part of the transit network. And the question probably appropriately queued up for Gorodata, who is in the informatics portion of the study of transit and technology, could be, how does the transit community, the transit network, come to engage industries like healthcare and organizations like LA Care, who already recognize the value and the importance of transit, and is providing through both government subsidy and private initiative access to transit. So Francisco, we'll certainly have some questions for you when we come back. Gora, let me turn to you now. Gorodata is with the P3 Innovation Center. He is on faculty at UC Irvine. He specializes in the broadest notion of informatics relative to transit technology, but also primarily healthcare innovation and the adaptation of technology to support the delivery of healthcare services in the broadest frame. And I know, Gora, that you've been working with folks out of UC Berkeley to address during the pandemic access to transit and delivery of services, even to the point of devices, wearable devices, mobile devices. Can you take from what Francisco talked about and the other panelists and sort of explain to us where you are in this space and what technology looks like as we address both our climate and healthcare needs?
Great. Thank you, Danny. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and really glad to be a part of this conversation. And Francisco was wondering why is he at this panel. Thank God, I'm glad that Francisco was there. So as a digital health person, in fact, I'm on the other end of the spectrum where Francisco is coming from, which is I'm part of the Southern California outpatient physician practice groups. In fact, I'm the chief digital health officer to multiple of these provider practices where we are seeing patients on a daily basis. So it is interesting, and the key question for the panel and for the audience itself is, should transit continue to be just a transit provider, take people from place A to place B, or should it also play an active role in providing other ancillary services which are including health related? So the question I'll have as a practice person and the provider is, as these passages are coming in, whether they are LA Care patients to us, can we get access to their health information during transit itself, or after they have left our office if there's in a situation? So the key question is what kind of role will technology play? So given my background, I've been in the tech field for the last 40 years or so, and of which for the last 20 plus years in the space of digital health across the state of California. For 10 years, I was part of LA County Public Health, developing different tech solutions for post 9/11, building a public health information network and different solutions for the county. Spent some time also with the state of California Department of Public Health, doing some of the innovative work. And also, in fact, helping to roll out the digital transformation which is taking place in the country since 2010, the paper to digitalization move. So my world and background is digital health, and I spent a significant time in building in the standards community. I'm involved in different standards groups like HL7, ISO TC215, IEEE. These are all acronyms, but basically the key thing we do is build standards. So why is standards important? And should we maybe start paying a little more attention to some of the gaps which may exist in standards? For example, earlier speakers have spoken about air quality monitoring, portable air quality measurements. In fact, there are gaps there. There are lack of standards. So therefore, we have inconsistency in terms of measurements and reporting. So whether those needs to be rapidly built. In terms of standards, I always give 4 examples or 4 or 5 examples to emphasize the role of standards, how standards have changed certain sectors. To name a few which are well known are how Wi-Fi. We all are connected today on this channel, hopefully using some kind of Wi-Fi, either your laptop or your cell phone. Well, that did exist 20 years ago. We really had difficulty because there were no standards. The telecom industry changed completely once the standards came into play. Look at the banking sector, how things have changed. Some of us are gray hair, no hair people definitely remember the 2 words which some in the audience may not know. Think of what life was 20 years before. How did we, when we traveled to another country, what did we do? Beside your passport, you had to have a traveler's check. Today, those 2 words are not in the lexicon. Ask a young generation, grandkid, what is that? And how ATMs have completely changed because of standards. I have another quiz I normally ask, but this may not be the right audience. I said, there's another example of 200 years old where standards completely change the trade and commerce of countries. And what was it? And to this audience, you know the answer. It is railroad, the tracks. Once they were standardized, we had trains moving from one country to another seamlessly. And this is what is coming in healthcare also. So which is the world I live in. So can we bring those standards and technology to transit, number 1. Number 2 is many of us go to gym, right? And we get in treadmill, we put our hand on the rod, it gets our measure of our heart rate. Can we build those kinds of solutions as a part of the transit as well? Because to take measurements, can we be much more interactive? The key question is, does public transit needs to be a very passive player and providing the logistics of transporting passenger from A to B, but can we also provide solutions and leverage technology to provide internet-based or IoT-based solution, which today does not exist at all? Some other speaker earlier spoke about equity or lack of equity. Can we bring those in, especially the social determinants of health, which is very important, which is now being recognized within the healthcare community, how those are a key and central part of the care. How do we provide that? And it is also accepted, and especially the pandemic has shown to us, if there's one benefit of the pandemic, if I have to say from a healthcare perspective, is the fact that we can provide remote care. We can provide targeted solution to patients, which otherwise wouldn't have been possible because earlier on some of the technological challenges were the barriers, and those have been really removed. Especially what the pandemic has shown us some of the possibilities. Yes, we need to change some of the laws, which today for example, our telecommunication laws, our broadband access laws are quite outdated. In fact, I always remind people within the healthcare community, we are governed by a law called HIPAA, which is dated 1996. In 2011, 2021, we are still governed by law of 1996. So it is an interesting mix. So the point I'll come back to is really, can we make transit experience such that we are able to provide health information in case of, and not only an emergency, but during the journey to the family members, to your well-wisher, to your PCPs, to your providers. Maybe there's an emergency. Can we do an SOS? So some of the things which Rocky was talking about, safety aspects, can we bring that to the health? Can the transit be enabled to provide this value-add service, which today it doesn't provide at all? And I think the answer is yes. because our users, the next generation, you just have to look at your kid or grandkid. You know, everybody is always glued to their phone. So they're already using the service. The last mile problem has been solved. The tech has already solved it. Mobile platforms have solved it. Now, can we bring in service to leverage and provide a much more 360 solution, a richer experience to our transit passengers, some of whom are patients or not? So let me pause here. But I think we have an opportunity here to change the discussion and open it up without pure being a passive provider of a service to an active and engaging provider of service. Thank you. You're mute. Danny, you're mute. Danny, you're mute.
Got background noise, so thank you. It sounds like, Gore, that you're issuing a challenge to the transit community to see themselves as more as just being the purveyor of folks from point A to point B, but also they recognize the amount of time that they are engaged in transiting, moving across the region. What else could be delivered in that environment? Whether it and how would technology be used to do that is one point. But then when I think of industries like the gas company or a utility like the gas company, where they're not really moving people, but they're creating broader infrastructure, how does that infrastructure then utilize that technology and create, again, another deliverable means of information about air quality and healthcare and the like? And so I'm actually, Tanya, going to ask you to lead us off with if it's possible, a short but direct answer around the equity notion that Gore just brought forward. And that is, as you build out the 2024 plan and you're developing the infrastructure to support the mobile hydrogen transformation vehicles that you discussed about, how do you see including, or how do you all envision including communities that have typically been the last to receive the benefits of technology, Pacoimas, the Inglewoods, the Comptons, for example? How do you see engaging them and informing them of the benefit of what you're now moving to do? And as you answer that, I want to sort of lay on that question for the others. In your area, how do you see addressing the equity issue and really, both communities of color, communities, the homeless populations, the other disenfranchised communities of Los Angeles, in what you're projecting to be your next 3 to 5 years? What types of projects, what types of technology, more specifically, what types of collaboration can you see, or do you see necessary to engage and develop a utilization pattern that benefits the broader community? And Tanya, I'll start with you and then let folks jump in.
Sure. So specifically with respect to hydrogen as a vehicle fuel, whether it be buses or passenger cars, one of the advantages of hydrogen is it in a way is a drop-in replacement for gasoline, and it doesn't require that you have a garage or the ability. So moving to the passenger side, there's some applications where if you might have trouble charging at home for whatever reason, a multifamily building, or you don't have the cost of rewiring your garage to provide the proper amount of power for an electric vehicle charger. If you had an option of affordable renewable hydrogen to power your vehicle, then it just gives you another option for clean fuels. I mean, I think the key to decarbonization and very much for equity is optionality, that you have choices in terms of how good, clean choices for decarbonization. So it makes, I won't go into the details of my Bolt experience, which has been fabulous in many ways, but I love the car and I love driving it, but I've experienced how there's still a lot of equity issues that have to be worked out. that I could see would be barriers. So I think hydrogen provides an option there. Also, when you're looking at other decarbonizing heat, decarbonizing buildings, electrification absolutely makes sense in some instances. And then there are others. I mean, when you just think about the fact that gas is in 94% of homes in Los Angeles, and basically Southern California's gas company service territory, it's a big deal. We're gonna have to decarbonize those homes faster than we're going to be able to electrify them all. So that's a very controversial topic, and this is a panel on transit, and so I don't want to go down that path. But clean fuels provide a decarbonization, affordable clean fuels, and I acknowledge there's work to be done to address the affordability issue. But if we don't start now, we're not going to be able to get there in time in terms of meeting 2045 goals. And then also in this crucial next decade when it's all hands on deck, we have to look at all options for decarbonization if we're going to have a chance of meeting our 2045 goals. So that's my somewhat roundabout response to your equity issue. I think options address that issue in a lot of ways. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the reflection you just shared says that the gas company is looking at it and recognizes that something must be done. The question, as you described, is what is it we do first, but also how do we include the opportunities that are generated by our transition to, as you described it, decarbonizing the environments from residential, and then also, as we talked about in this environment, the transit situations. I didn't see any hands who'd like to jump in and go. And Matt, you're not on my screen, but I know that the AQMD this is a topic.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Just to be brief, because I know that we've got another panel coming up, and our vice chair.
And I haven't been tracking time.
Yeah, and our vice chair is probably chomping at the bit to provide her remarks. So let me just be very brief in that. Indeed, the South Coast is working very hard on trying to clean up the air in the next 3 to 5 years. Specifically in disadvantaged communities through our AB 617 program. We see one of the keys to achieving clean air is through advanced technologies, but we also have to look at the time frame. So near-term emission reductions can be had today with near zero natural gas. As we lay the groundwork for 5 to 7 years, we've got to transition to battery and hydrogen technologies, and we've got to do all of the above. So appreciate the opportunity, Danny.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got Eli, I've got 3 hands raised. Can I get to them and then transit back to you? If we do it real quick. You're muted, all right? Or at least I don't hear you.
Yeah, so we got to move on to the next panel, unfortunately, just because we're running out of time. So I want to real quick introduce our next framer for the next panel. Thank you all for on the last panel.
And would you put your comments in the chat for everyone? Yeah, and thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. If you want to add your comments, you can add it to the chat. That would be great. So I'm honored to introduce Senator Vanessa Delgado. She's the incoming vice chair of the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and she was appointed in 2019 by the California Senate. She served as the mayor of Maywood and the California State Senator for the 32nd District, and is going to start her term starting shortly. So, Senator, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I was the mayor of Montebello. Just wanted to, I have Montebello pride there. So.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I don't know where I got that. Wikipedia. Seriously.
No worries. No worries. But thank you so much for having me on, and I'm really honored to be a part of the conversation, and was just going to share a little bit about my transportation experience and how that frames what I think about, moving forward as vice chair. So I'll go ahead and I worked on some remarks, and I'll just read that off to you all. I just wanted to share from the time that I was 10 years old to when I graduated from high school. I awoke at 5:30 in the morning to take the RTD bus from the east side to school in Pasadena. I know the 266 bus takes you up Rosemead Boulevard, and you can connect on the 177 bus to get to the Rose Bowl. And it may no longer be the RTD, but the MTA actually uses the same line numbers 26 years later. So transit quite literally represented a new future for me. It's how I got from Boyle Heights and Pico Rivera to the cities I grew up in to Pasadena, where I went to school on scholarship, hoping that it would one day open new doors for me. And that hard work did translate into experiences that have led me to become vice chair for the AQMD. I am the first Latina or Latino and only the second woman to serve in a leadership role on the board. It's a responsibility I don't take lightly. And I feel that I must be a voice for underserved areas and for people like that little girl boarding the RTD at 5:55, breathing unhealthy air in the late 1980s. And looking forward to my upcoming role as vice chair, I am singularly focused on people living in underserved areas in Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties, whose lives seem eerily similar to the experiences I had growing up. There are producers of air contamination located in these communities. Mobile sources of pollution transfers our freeways and major roads. But I'm also aware that the drivers of those trucks are Latino truck owners living in communities like the ones I grew up in, simply working to make sure that their families have food and clothes. People working in the factories look like my uncles and cousins. The only places that they can find steady employment and benefits are in those factories. So for me, pushing for better air quality is easy. The rhetoric, the need, all of it. It's easy to know and believe that we can no longer be the most contaminated area in the nation. How we achieve better air quality is another matter entirely. And I have a spoiler alert for all of you out there. I don't have all the solutions, but I am really hungry for change and exploring all options for achieving our air quality goals. I'm also a small business owner who knows how hard it is to get by and that our solutions must involve industry input. I'm a parent who wants to pass along a better world to my daughter, and I know we can do it. I just humbly request your help in figuring out that path forward. And just wanted to, again, thank Move LA for having me here today. Thank you, Eli, for inviting me, and I'm honored to be a part of this very important conversation. And I think Eli is
excellent.
Oh, there.
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry about that. Turn my video off. Well, I'm actually, thank you so much, Senator. And I'm going to hand it over to Gloria, who is going to moderate the second panel. I know we're running about 20 minutes late. Apologies for that. But we still want to give folks their time. I hope they can stick around a little bit longer. Let us know in the chat if you can. But we're gonna keep pushing through. It is recorded, so we'll be able to post that as well so that people can watch the full thing if they have to drop off too.
Okay, thank you, Gloria.
So the race begins. We have about 5 minutes each. So Marcel, are you first up?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't. Yes, I can hear you. So you are Chief Sustainability Officer at the LA Department of Transportation. You and I worked together briefly on a low-income car share project, what seems like a decade ago, but it was only about 5 or 6 years ago. Could you, and I'd sort of like to talk to you about something in the same vein. I mean, could you talk about what universal mobility, basic mobility is, and what LADOT is doing to scale up in that direction? And maybe I'll ask all the questions I was going to ask you, and you can use your 4 minutes to answer it however you want. Do you think, now that the world is beginning to sort of acknowledge the importance of equity, I'm curious how LADOT is addressing the need for equity, and curious how LADOT is addressing air quality, which is another huge issue.
Sure. So yeah, I will feel free to mark time, but for those of you following along in the chat, I just dropped a link to a recent Washington Post article that quotes Selena Reynolds, our LADOT's general manager, about a project or a grant application that we submitted in response to the US DOT infra structure, discretionary grant. And I think it's a good indicator of how we are repositioning opportunities, and really not to do anything new, but to really piece together all of this kind of intersectional work that already happens every day across the region, right? Everyone, in the chat is doing a piece of this work in one way or the other, right? I saw community college trustee Mike Fong, in the list of attendees. It's like, how do we partner on developing multi-benefit projects, right? So many times when we're talking about doing projects in a community that has need, we take a piece of it, right? And we say, we're going to do the bus stop, or we're going to do the bike lane, or we're going to do the micro transit, or we're going to do the air quality monitoring. But I think really we have to think about, how do we pull all of these efforts together, identify what the public's role is in delivering projects, understand what our role is in regulating private sector industry that wants to, and how we can align with the private sector to meet our outcomes, whether it's sustainable shared trips, whether it's promoting, clean vehicle technology, and then how do we partner it with like making a real impact, right? And so you asked a first question about universal basic income. Well, universal basic income is a concept that we've been exploring, and
universal basic mobility, actually.
No, wait. So universal basic income is a concept that is out there, folks. If you look at what Mayor Tubbs did in Stockton, if you heard Mayor Garcetti's State of the City earlier this week, and you saw that they're going to be providing $1,000 to, I think, 20,000 families, with no strings attached, like that is universal basic income. Well, how do you think about alleviating the cost of mobility, or looking at people's mobility needs within the city? What might benefit, someone going to school in the morning, jumping on a dash bus or a metro bus might meet their needs, but that might not meet the same need for a service worker going to a job at 3 a.m, right? Or a mother having to take her family. And so for us, we really were trying to explore what are the different needs that people have, and how do we look at universal basic mobility as meeting people where they are. It's a concept. It's something that has started. There's been a lot of conversations that have been starting about it. We're doing a lot of the internal work ourselves, but we most recently submitted and were awarded a grant from the California Air Resources Board to really kind of start delivering a suite of mobility options in South Los Angeles. I'm sorry, my phone's ringing over here. And so, that is really something that we did in conjunction with a lot of the work that's already been in South LA, a lot of the efforts. Move LA is part of those conversations. Slate Z, Sage, Scope, ACT. We were looking at what are folks interested in doing it. We heard people wanted free transit. We heard that people wanted more electric vehicle car sharing. We've heard that the existing models of micromobility don't really always address the needs that people have. And so we are looking at piloting a suite of mobility options, including a mobility wallet, an electric shuttle, expanding Blue LA, new electric vehicle charging. But we're also heard that people still care about safe streets. And so we're also bringing in safe street work, and we're funding community engagement. And so we need to actually compensate people for their local community knowledge. And how do we train resident advisors to sit at the table and help us, provide us on an ongoing basis, not just 3 months, but for 4 years, on how the service is meeting their needs, and create a continuous feedback loop that sits resident advisors and implementation partners at the table together. So, so we just got partially funded. We got 7 million. We asked for, I think, like 15. But these are all things that were facilitated by all of the work that has happened across the state on creating cap and trade funding, you know, and to be reinvested in disadvantaged communities. I think in the way that we have to partner as cities with the folks who know best about what's happening. You know, I saw Veronica Padilla on here earlier, the folks in Watts that did the TCC work, the South LA work. And so really, the work is really about the intersectionality. How do we do workforce development training and create pipelines of opportunity to also take advantage of the mobility investments? So I think we're at time, so I'll wait for questions.
Thank you so much. And I'm yay about being interested in integration, and yay about LADOT's commitment to equity. I think we have to move on. Eli, is that?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, next up is Jean from Tranzito.
So,
and hopefully we'll have time for a little bit of cross discussion towards the end.
So Jean, I love the name Tranzito because it really grabs one's attention. And I'm curious, I understand that you help cities with micro mobility, multimodal infrastructure, and curbside management. And I did read an article in Forbes magazine that talked about how curbs are the next frontier in urban mobility. So curious about that. And also, we've been long interested in mobility hubs. So it would be great if you could, in the next 4 minutes, talk about that too. What do they look like to you?
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, the word, Tranzito is obviously a play on the Spanish word for transit, Tranzito, right? And the idea, of course, is to really understand who the market is. And really, the bus is the silver bullet, right? If we want transit equity and if we want cleaner streets, it's all about activating the bus. It's going to be the future of smart mobility, the way we look at it. So when we're looking at that, what we're saying is, how can we get bus ridership to be more effective, right? The average speed in LA is less than 10 miles per hour. That's terrible. So if we can find ways to make that right lane quicker for buses, we're solving multiple problems in one, right? And what we're seeing is this emerging trend of these macro trends, right? Ride hail, micromobility, on-demand delivery, package delivery. These are having an increasing demand for curb space, but the curb space is finite. So what does that mean? That means that we're at an inflection point, generational inflection point, where cities can now be like, you know what? We control the leverage. We have the finite control of these curb spaces. If we could network them, if we could power them with grid power, now all of a sudden we could create a means for all of these private industries to create a carrot approach, not a stick approach to regulation. And that's really what we see as mobility hubs. Mobility hubs are new mobility transit stops. They're an ability for curb space, furniture zone space, for example, scooter docks or shared lockers, to be co-located. So now all of a sudden, one location along the curb creates a multiple benefits of multiple modes. And cities can now create that carrot approach instead of a stick approach. Now, if we co-locate that curb space with bus stops, now you're creating a true intermodal paradise, right? Where the incentives for someone to take the bus increases, because now the average speed goes from 10 miles per hour to 15 miles per hour because there's less double parking. Now all of a sudden there's opportunities, as Marcel mentioned, for a digital wallet and a universal digital purse, where now if someone is vetted as low income, boom, they get a discount for a scooter. Or if someone is taking a bus, boom, they get a transfer rate for an Uber ride. So this is this holistic thinking that LA has really championed, and it's all about frameworks. As Salida has really championed with MDS, scooter companies were kicking and screaming until they realized it helped them, right? It increased operational efficiencies because they only had one regulation for all the cities in the United States for data management. So these frameworks is the key. If the cities can create the framework and own the framework, now they don't have to deal with having to actually create the vehicles. They create the framework and private industry helps them solve that problem. So that's really what we do. We act as property managers of the curb. We work for the cities, and cities can use us, hire us, and fire us as they need if we're doing our job and helping bringing private industry together, both vehicles, infrastructure, and whatnot, to help the bus remain the backbone of smart city mobility, then everyone wins.
Yeah. Wow, you're fast. Yes, please transform curb space with the carrot approach. I like that. And yeah, more mobility hubs as soon as possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know we're pressed for time. We are working with LADOT on their first mobility hub. It's set to launch pretty soon. For those that are interested, you go to tranzito.org/LADOT. It's a hidden webpage. Also, obviously, working in San Francisco on a mobility hub with Spin. So bringing in private industry to really activate public transportation is the key.
Wow, so we got some news we broke here, a hidden webpage. I'm putting that in the chat for everybody. Can I put it on our website too?
Please do.
Awesome.
Okay, next up, Ronnie.
Hi. Hi, Gloria. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me all right. My name is Ronnie, and I work over at LA Metro in our operations department. Previously recruited to work in our Office of Extraordinary Innovation to oversee our deployment of Metro Micro, which is an on-demand transit service that is part of our family of services over at Metro. Just wanted to, join the group to talk about kind of what the future may or may not look like. Certainly, we're doing a lot of self-reflection. I'd say it's a bit of an identity crisis for the industry as a whole to think about who we are and who we become. And so it has been both a very challenging and exciting year, I think, to think through how we adjust in the time of the pandemic, not only for the big bus and rail, but also for our newer on-demand solutions as well. And so just wanted to answer any questions about Metro Micro and certainly about how we continue to address equity, especially during this time.
Ooh, well, let's start with how Metro Micro is addressing equity issues.
Well, I think one of the interesting concepts for us early on, about 4 or 5 years ago, when Metro agencies started to look at on-demand technology, part of the concern was that much of the private sector was focused on deploying these services in areas where people could afford surge pricing. We weren't really looking, the private sector wasn't really looking at how is this equitable, how does this improve the existing connectivity, and how does this address or alleviate traffic? And so for us at Metro, we really wanted to do our due diligence to understand what kind of service model could allow this type of technology to benefit all communities. Because once we have real-time information, we can make better decisions about how we get to where we need to go, not only in terms of the price, but also in terms of the travel time, which we know is critically important as a result of our next-gen bus restructure. So I'd say in terms of equity, the piece that I'd like to highlight is we have 9 zones where we are putting in on-demand transit. We're currently operating in 5, but the one that I'm most excited about and hopeful for is the first one that we launched in December, which is in the communities of Watts and Willowbrook. And I think that it is really important to know that we are going to have a presence in those communities that is going to stay there versus something that is dropped in and picked up really quickly. And fantastically, what we've seen is that Watts Willowbrook across our first 5 zones is our top performer. And especially as we see new use cases emerging. So one of the things I wanted to highlight when we think about equity is just the impact of the pandemic on families. I'm a parent of toddler twins, so certainly trying to adjust to this new life and to what hybrid education will look like. So I think the more that we can think about equity, not only in terms of socioeconomics, but also so that families can get where they need to go and that we can bring as much opportunity as possible to that whole unit.
Well, glad to hear that the industry is rethinking how to operate. And speaking of which, I know that you've always been involved in innovative projects, but you've moved from the Office of Extraordinary Innovation to operations, and certainly COVID has challenged operations at Metro. What do you see the future to be there?
I think the top priority is really creating a system that is not only actually safe, but perceived as safe. And I think that that's where a lot of our focus is going to be. I know that the cleanliness has been top of mind, not only in terms of how frequently we clean, what we use, plexi partitions and all of that, but also just making people understand that transit is a safe option and that it's somewhere that they can feel is reliable. And I think that's a lot of the focus that you'll see in the next year as we look ahead.
One last question. I'm curious, how many more of those zones that you were talking about will there be in the semi-near future?
So we're actually going to get up to 9 zones throughout the county once we finish the launch in September. And then for this particular pilot, we have 3 years of revenue service that will hopefully be under our belt to see whether or not on-demand transit becomes a permanent part of the family at Metro.
Yay, I'm glad the transit industry is modernizing.
And Gloria, maybe I can just add one more thing on the point of equity. I just want to kind of give a shout out to our board, because a really good decision that I think was made is that so often these services are just exceedingly expensive. They're not reasonable. And some of these zones are, up to 20 square miles. And right now, because of the pandemic, part of what our board approved and advocated for was coming in at a $1 trip. And I don't think there's anywhere else probably in the transit other than the transit space where you can really kind of come in and provide that level of access to everyone.
Yeah, and yay to fare free transit too, I hope. All right, can we move on? Alyssa.
Hello, thank you so much.
I don't know how to pronounce your last name, so.
No worries. Alyssa Harley from Circuit Transit. I'm the Director of Transit Development.
Okay, so you're a shuttle service or?
Yeah.
Wait, let's go back. I looked at your website and it said that Circuit is going to rewire mobility. Excellent idea, but I don't really know what that means.
So at Circuit, we do all electric community shuttles. We're focused on the first last mile. We have operations in Santa Monica, Venice, Marina del Rey, and Lamert Park, where you can get a free ride in an electric vehicle by an employed driver.
Okay, so which neighborhoods are you serving and what are you learning? Like what is required of a neighborhood for this kind of a service to work?
Yeah, so we work within short zones, as Metro had said. The very large 20 square mile on-demand zone is not very feasible, but we found a very good sweet spot in the 0 to 2, 0 to 4 square mile zones where you can get a community trip. It's aligned to your schedule. It's on demand. You can request it through our app, by texting, or by waving down a vehicle. They are fare free, so they're able to include more people than a paid option. And we look forward to the opportunity to working with more of the transit providers in the Los Angeles area to increase the access to be able to provide that first and the last mile of service, where the in-between is connected through the bus or the rail or another option. We know that there's many different types of trips that people are taking. A trip they may be comfortable taking in a scooter may be different than the one they're comfortable taking in an electric vehicle or bus or rail. We think that there's a great landscape of options, and we would love to bring them to more neighborhoods like Lamert Park, which is in South Los Angeles. There we have some riders that they live in Lamert Park. They take our service to connect to Metro Rail or LADOT bus, and then they go to the coast where they work, and they take our service there in Marina del Rey and Santa Monica for that last mile to work, and it saves them time and money.
I love the idea that there are suddenly becoming all these multimodal options for people to not have to drive a single family vehicle. So should we move? Thank you so much, Alyssa.
Yeah. And I think that, so I'd be happy to answer any other questions or, I think really being able to provide more trips to more types of people in more areas is key to decreasing the congestion and air quality issues in Los Angeles, while also increasing mobility. And, there are many people that take a lot of trips in a single occupancy vehicle and are able to do that. But there's also many people who don't own a car that are not able to get to the grocery store, not able to get to healthcare. We found that in Limerick Park, most people are using us to get to food and access the local community. So I think a blended option that complements transit and allows people to take these multiple community trips in an area and align for the non-commute trips is a great way to reduce single occupancy vehicles and to just get more people to more places that they need to go.
Who decides which communities you work in? Do you approach communities or do they have to approach you?
So we've had both ways. In Santa Monica, we're supported by Santa Monica Travel and Tourism. In Marina Del Rey, it's with the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Marina Del Rey, as well as the LA Harbors and Beaches. And in Limerick Park, it's with the LA Clean Tech Incubator. We're partnering a service, and LADWP has recently wrapped our vehicle with some marketing on their EV programs. We know that 90% of our riders, it's their first time in an electric vehicle. So getting that exposure to a clean mobility option has really been a great way to partner with multiple organizations. So if you want a circuit shuttle in your community, we'd be happy to work with you to find out how we can get the funding and the support to be able to provide free electric trips in your community.
Thank you, Alyssa. We move on to Andrew Papson. Hi, Andrew. You're muted. Still muted. Eli,
He's
can you
unmuted,
unmute him?
Yeah. No, he's unmuted. There might be a speaker issue or a microphone issue. Hey, you want to try that? Oh, okay. He's going to call in. So he said, skip to Scott. No worries. It happens. All right, Scott, you're up. Okay.
Great.
So Scott, manager of power engineering, that sounds like a very powerful position. What exactly do you do though? I couldn't quite figure it out.
Sure. So I'm the manager of electric transportation at Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And so I've been here for over 35 years and almost my entire career working on electric transportation issues. So it's been really exciting to see, the latest developments in technology and where kind of this industry is going.
So what are you doing at LADWP to scale up and deploy infrastructure for clean vehicles?
Sure.
Because,
yeah.
for example, well, go ahead.
No, so I was going to say, so we're actually doing a lot because a lot is happening. The mayor just last month announced some results of a pretty comprehensive study to kind of show how the city is going to get to 100% renewable energy. It's called LA 100, and it's really kind of an unprecedented analysis of the city's pathways to reaching 100% renewable, while prioritizing equity, reliability, and affordable rates for local residents. And part of that really looked at electric transportation and building electrification. So, how do we get there to get to those very, very large numbers of penetration? So, our system is geared up to do that. You may be aware that the governor in September issued an executive order outlining zero emission vehicle targets for California, very aggressive. By 2035, 100% of all in-state sales of new passenger vehicles to be, and trucks to be zero emission. By 2035,
and we're going to do it, right?
By 2035, transition to 100% off-road vehicles to be zero emission. And by 2045, 100% of all medium and heavy duty vehicles in the state zero emission. So it's really aggressive, and it's not just the state that's making those types of commitments, but even on a national level, you can see it from the car manufacturers, the OEMs, they're really phasing out gasoline. So we see this as, this is our role in the city. You know, we're a vertically integrated utility. We provide generation, transmission, and distribution for the 4 million residents in Los Angeles. And we see this as our role, is to facilitate electrification of transportation, and it's coming, and it's really exciting. We see it as solving a lot of problems here in the city. So we're embracing that. We're doing a lot to facilitate transit electrification, the bus routes from both LADOT and Metro that are being electrified. We're providing that service to do that. Transit's coming. We're seeing electrification at the airport. We're seeing it at the Port of Los Angeles. We're facilitating these DC fast charge plazas that you're starting to see throughout the city. So it's really providing the power and the interconnection for those, whether it's Tesla or others. And we're installing DC fast charge plazas at LADWP and city facilities throughout the LA region. So it's you know, go ahead.
Will there be more? Wow, can't believe I did that.
Sure, I kind of missed it. I think you were on mute. Still on mute.
That's okay. There you go. I asked you, does that work?
Yes, got it.
Oh, yay. Okay, we're solved.
Okay, I wanted to ask you one last question.
Sure.
How about like charging infrastructure in apartment buildings? Because we've been pursuing the topic of equity throughout this conversation. And it seems to me that people who don't, you know, have the money to buy charging infrastructure for their homes because they live in apartments, for example.
Sure. Yeah, so apartments, multi-unit dwellings, they are challenging. So one of the things we're really excited to see is that through our rebate program, we have one for the installation of charging stations at commercial properties. So that would include apartments, condos, and others. We've seen a tremendous uptick, if you will, in that area. So, we've provided rebates to over 9,000 commercial customers, and a huge percentage of those are now in multi-unit dwellings. So, it's $4,000 per installed charger, and then if it's in a DAC, they get a $1,000 kicker, so it's $5,000. Up to 40 chargers at a location. So, an apartment, if they install 40 and it's in a DAC, it's $200,000. And we're seeing a lot of customers stepping up to take advantage of that. So we're really pleased to be kind of part of that solution.
Excellent. We have to move on, but thank you so much for. So next we have, welcome back, Andrew. But I think.
Okay,
excellent.
How did I do, Gloria?
We got you.
Loud and clear? Excellent. Thank you so much. Sorry about that, everybody. My name is Andrew Papson. I work in Southern California Edison's e-mobility group, where I help our truck and bus fleet customers deploy EV chargers. Let's see here. Clean air, carbon reduction, and public transit are connected in so many ways. We're lucky that in the Los Angeles region, our transits have been the innovators in deploying EV fleets all the way back to 2014. And at Southern California Edison, we've been proud to be part of that process every step of the way. Now, when we talk about EV benefits to communities, both in terms of air quality and climate change, we're talking about getting diesel heavy-duty vehicles off the road, replacing them with zero emissions like electric.
Thank you.
Need is especially urgent, as we've heard. I'm sorry?
I said, thank you for that. Getting diesel trucks.
Needs especially urgent because the impacts are most strongly felt in our disadvantaged communities. What's appealing, especially about transit, they're cutting pollution along the routes and communities they serve, so both providing service and local air quality benefits. Now, transits are the beachheads for EV trucks. To really hit our criteria pollutants and greenhouse gas targets, we're really going to have to deeply electrify both transits and the truck markets. But trucks are harder to electrify in the first wave. They're smaller companies, more sensitive to capital costs, with less predictable truck usage. In comparison, transits are a fantastic market for deploying EVs with regular, reliable routes, returning to the depot to charging, and the capital requirement increment above natural gas is smaller. That's why EV transit is such a critical focus area for Southern California Edison and for many on the call. Another thing I want to acknowledge, I'm really proud of the work SCE has done to help our customers deploy EV buses and build out the infrastructure. I'm proud of our programs like Charge Ready Transport to help fleets afford infrastructure upgrades, and proud of our innovative EV rates that waive demand charges. But the truth is, as the utility, we're just supporting players in the battle. The true innovators are local transit agencies who are the ones deploying the technology while making service and moving passengers. Mention a few, I'm very grateful for the innovators at agencies like Foothill Transit, Antelope Valley, Long Beach Transit, LA Metro, LADOT, and many others with projects in the pipeline. If anybody would like to learn more about our programs like Charge Ready Transport, we shared the resources with Eli that are available to you. Let me pause there before diving into some infrastructure thoughts and pass it back to you, Gloria.
I just wanted to ask you, I understand that the goal is to get 7 million electric vehicles on the road, up from 500,000 today. Curious how that's going.
Well, we keep building infrastructure and as rapidly as we can. Charge Ready Transport, we're building infrastructure for heavy duty trucks and buses and shuttles and off-road equipment. And just this summer, we're launching a new program for Charge Ready that's focusing on light duty. So EV car charging, not just at commercial and workplaces, but also a deep focus in the multifamily market, which, as Scott said, is a really tough market to crack for EVs.
Well, and I have to say, last thing I will say, I've been living out in the desert lately in Joshua Tree, and there are a ton of visitors out here 6 months out of the year, and there are 2 EV charging stations out here. So just thought I'd bring that up. I mean,
no, absolutely. Destination charging is really important. We're also doing a push into parks and beaches to try to provide some of that destination charging that people need when traveling to these locations.
Should we, do we have one? No. Oh, you are the last panelist. So what else do you want to say? Because we're so grateful for the work that SoCal Edison is doing.
Well, I think too, we had, I was going to bring the rest of the panelists up because we have a couple of questions that were put out there that I think everybody could answer. I think that'd be great. One of them regarded accessibility. Jacob asked a couple of questions about, accessibility features both on the app. So I guess, for Tranzito and I don't know if Ronnie's still here, but also with Circuit, just accessibility with the vehicles.
Yeah, that's a great question. When it comes to accessibility, I think the solution that we see is to a twofold approach. For one, we utilize the tap card, for example, as our transit card. So for our bike rooms with Metro, we're transitioning to use the tap card itself as the entry key, not actually interacting with Cubic, the maker of tap itself, but using the card itself, the unique ID, and allowing people to use that as their key in essence, right? Those are kind of just simple, pragmatic things to get people to, to have accessibility that's open for everyone, to not have to provide a new key element that people don't want in their wallet, and so on and so forth. We also really believe in frameworks, right? And utilizing the open API environment. So instead of, for example, creating our own app that has a ride trip planner, for example, we're working with Transit app. to incorporate the Metro Bike Hub locations within the Transit app. So this idea of an open API framework, utilizing stuff that's already out there, whether it's a tap card or different MOS apps, we feel is the best way to go to really create a universal solution.
I guess I'm just going to go in a little bit of a different direction in terms of accessibility. So one of the things that we thought about kind of early on, and it's part of working on a project for multiple years, was how do we, create and establish a new fleet that has vehicles that are most adjustable to people's needs. And so we work very closely with the Aging and Disability Network to bring them in and actually advise us on what to do and what to order. And so what we've done is that in the Metro Micro app, if you go onto the Google or Apple stores and you do keyword Metro Micro, is you can actually indicate what your mobility device is. And our plan later this year is that you'll be able to reserve additional space. One of the really interesting findings that we had was that for people that use wheelchairs, they often travel in pairs. And so we made sure that 50% of the fleet that's ADA actually has a conversion for 2 wheelchairs. And that's a direct result of that community input. So just kind of wanted to note that we definitely would love any additional feedback. If you have an opportunity to ride, I'm gonna have to run, but thank you again, Move LA, fantastic job. Glad to join any future panels as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can talk from Circuit standpoint. So we have an exclusively all electric fleet. We do know that there's many options for ADA vehicles, which we are able to bring in for our partnership. That includes both the vehicle behind me, which is low floor, ability for us to bring in electric vehicle options, those that would also have more capacity for more positions for ADA, for wheelchairs specifically. We also do train our drivers. They are employees of our service. They're not independent contractors. So we're able to train them in assisting riders, whether they have a wheelchair or other accessibility needs, to be able to help them use our service and to provide a door-to-door service that minimizes the amount of time they have to walk. Our website is accessible, and we're working on our app being accessible as well. And we're also happy to work with other transit apps that are already further ahead in this space, especially for any city partnerships. We're happy to make those further meet more people's needs in that way.
Awesome. Thank you. The other interesting question that we had, I know Danny had a question about fareless transit, but I think that would have been more for Marcel, which he had to drop off, and Ronnie. But the other kind of question that bubbled up is this idea of like, what can, particularly where, you are putting in a lot of chargers, Andrew and Scott, you were talking about that, and with Tranzito and with Circuit and others, like what opportunities are there for like micro entrepreneurs, otherwise known as street vendors, and small businesses near these sort of bus stops, mobility hubs, charging stations, to really kind of make a business and work with local communities, particularly to empower communities of color to basically make this a business opportunity?
I could touch a little bit, since we don't generally deal with the public chargers, but with Circuit, as you can see with the vehicle behind me in Lamert Park, we've worked with a panel of local community partners to design the service to really meet the needs of the community, both the residents that live there and the businesses in the area. There are opportunities for businesses to advertise on the vehicle, as well as provide materials inside the vehicle and digital ads on our iPads. We focus on making it fun and also really integrating and working with the community. We also implemented a local hiring program where the community decided which zip codes they consider to be local, and we hired within that area. So that's mainly our interaction with the local business community, as well as for events that they're doing, such as Earls on Crenshaw and Lamert Park recently had a soul roll event for roller skating, and we were able to provide some rides to that event. So that's another way that we can help with the local business community.
Love Earls. They make some great burgers.
And I'll just add to that by saying, it really is this delicate balance of where the government plays a role, right? The power of private industry is something that we should not underestimate. It's really about the public, to create policies and frameworks to allow private industry to shine within the rules and regulations of what we want, right? So I feel personally, rather than creating, for example, pop-up spaces within mobility hubs, for example, rather than doing that, let's think about a little more holistically, right? We've learned through multiple studies that when people just get around slower, whether it's buses or bikes or scooters, they interact more, commerce more with local businesses than if they're driving. Simple as that. So if we can create the frameworks to allow the bus to go faster, so more people want to use it, for digital IDs to automatically identify who's low income, to provide discounts, for example, or as we talked about, transfers for micromobility, it just allows more people to make their own private decision that they would rather take intermodal transit or bus transit rather than driving. And that alone will facilitate economic opportunities for small businesses. So that's my take on it. I believe it's not about us in the private or public sector creating these jobs, but really more about creating the framework so that private industry will flourish on its own.
And Eli, I can comment on how to make EVs accessible to small and local businesses. One of the things that we try to do in working with fleets, for example, I'm working on a fleet project right now, 30 work trucks. Let's install 30 level 2 chargers behind the fence for the truck depot. And let's also put in 2 or 3 DC fast chargers in front of the fence so that the fleet still benefits from these DC fast chargers. And they're also available to local businesses in the area who want to pull up and charge. And that's perfect for the local business that maybe gets 3 EV vans that needs a reliable place to top up. And we see that as a great way to providing more of those local resources.
That makes sense. I think one of the folks at the LA Clean Tech Incubator that we share space with, Green Commuter, I got to borrow one of their Tesla X's for a weekend, and I found one of those chargers next to an In-N-Out, and I topped up and enjoyed a nice burger. So I think those opportunities to integrate in the community and create local jobs while also I think I would say the conclusion, probably, Gloria, what do you think from this panel, is just integration. The more we can integrate, the better.
I'm muted.
No, you're on. You're live.
I think integration is what this new century is all about. And it's so great that we're thinking of it in terms of race, we're thinking in terms of equity, and we're thinking in terms of transportation. Yay.
Well, thank you all. And thank you all to the attendees for sticking with us. I know we ran super late. We recorded it. We will post it online on our website so that people can listen to it later. But we also we'll put it actually on that resource page that I just provided the link to, so that everybody can watch it there and then click through some of the resources for our supporters, our sponsors, as well as some of the panelists. Yeah, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and happy Earth Day, everybody. Go out there and ride a bike, take an electric vehicle, and do something to help us save the Earth.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and happy Earth Day.
Thank you, Eli.
Happy Earth Day.